Welcome to ADAA's Ask the Author Q&A, Hello Baby, Goodbye Intrusive Thoughts. This presentation is moderated by Dr. Sohei Kim. Dr. Kim is an assistant professor of psychiatry, pediatrics, and obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Massachusetts Chan Medical School. She is a clinical psychologist with subspecialty expertise in perinatal and infant mental health. Her research and clinical work have focused on parents and infants during the perinatal period, as she recognizes this period as a critical time during which identification of at-risk individuals and intervention to mitigate risk can be highly effective with far-reaching implications.
Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Jenny Ip. She has an extensive bio, which I'm going to try to summarize. Dr. Jenny Ip is a licensed psychologist, author, speaker, media contributor, and a nationally recognized OCD, anxiety, and parenting expert. Since childhood, Dr. Ip has fought her own personal battle with OCD. Inspired by her own struggles and motivated to help others overcome theirs, she has dedicated her career to treating families and individuals with severe OCD, anxiety disorders, and parenting stress for over 2 decades. Dr. Ip is on the board of directors of the International OCD Foundation. She's a clinical member of ABCT and a clinical fellow of the ADAA. In 2008, Dr. Ip established the Renewed Freedom Center in Los Angeles, followed by the Little Thinker Center in 2016, dedicated to providing cutting-edge treatments for children, parents, and families. So welcome, Dr. Ip. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I'm grateful that we have this incredible opportunity to ask you questions and learn from your insights. What an important topic for new moms who are struggling with intrusive thoughts and many clinicians who are doing their best to help them. So, Dr. Ip, would you start us off by telling us a bit about the topic and what inspired you to write this book?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so glad to be having this conversation because maternal wellness and perinatal, postpartum OCD and anxiety is so often overlooked. And that is exactly what inspired me to write this book, because even though I suffered from OCD since the age of 4 is when I first remembered having intrusive thoughts, I never realized that I would even suffer through it again, especially during the postpartum period. I think I thought I was an expert by that point, and come on, I would know how to deal with OCD, but OCD came in a really nebulous form when I had my twin boys almost 8 years ago. And having gone through that experience and realizing how little attention was put forth for mothers and how many mothers still get put on the 5150 hold because they have intrusive thoughts of their newborn, or they have postpartum OCD where there's little information on. It just inspired me to put that information out there, and this book is very near and dear to me. It's one of its kind. So I'm so thrilled to be here to dispel the truth about maternal wellness and to shed some light about this overlooked topic.
Thank you. And thank you also for being so generous in sharing your story through your book, but also to us directly in this webinar. As we begin, can you first tell us a bit about intrusive thoughts? So we have received some questions in advance. And as Jolie mentioned, please feel free to type in questions in the Q&A, and we're going to try to get to as many of them as possible. But let's start by what intrusive thoughts are. There were some questions about what common symptoms are, if there are common triggers, and what contributes to spiraling of these intrusive thoughts.
Okay, so that is many questions packed into one. So let me just start with intrusive thoughts and what OCD is, because I think this is what leads to a lot of the misinformation out there. So if you believe what you see on TV, stop. that is a misrepresentation. A lot of it is a misrepresentation of what OCD really is in its truest form. It's not some quirky disorder where you're just going in and out of doors and getting up and down from chairs. It's not just a washing disorder or a contamination disorder. Having OCD means that you have obsessions and compulsions. So what do obsessions mean? Obsessions are the intrusive thoughts. And intrusive thoughts means that they're anything that comes into your mind, whether it's a word, an image, a sensation. And when you have that intrusive obsession, you don't like it. You don't want to have it. It doesn't sit well with you. It doesn't align with your belief system or your values. And because a lot of the intrusive thoughts can trigger discomfort, anxiety, even feelings of disgust and shame, we want to do something about it. So what is it that we do? Well, that part is called the compulsions. Compulsions are any behaviors, whether physical or mental, that serves to get rid of the uncomfortable feelings. So if anyone has superstitions, that's kind of like a compulsion. You engage in these magical behaviors because you believe you're preventing bad luck, or in the OCD world, whatever catastrophic consequence that you are fearing would occur. So the nature of intrusive thoughts, which often gets confused with psychosis, is that you don't want to have these thoughts. A new mother or father, might I say, so I also want to be clear that postpartum OCD doesn't occur in just mothers, it also occurs in fathers. So the nature of the intrusive thoughts for new motherhood and fatherhood is that you have these thoughts because you care. And I think that also gets misrepresented too often. A lot of mothers think, well, I have these intrusive thoughts, so I must be a bad mom. Or I have these intrusive thoughts of harm to my newborn, or I'm imagining my newborn dying, so there must be something wrong with me. And that is very, very different from psychosis, which unfortunately, not even many people in the medical and mental health community understands. So if you do have intrusive thoughts, you have to realize you have them because you care, not because you're a bad person or a bad parent or a bad mother. OCD tackles whatever it is that you care about. So guess what? When you're in the perinatal phase, what you care most about is the survival of your fetus and the safety and wellness of your own health. Because still today, in this day and age, mothers across the globe still die from childbirth. So there's a lot of fear around that during the perinatal period. And then, of course, during the postpartum period, the intrusive thoughts tend to surround the health and wellness of baby. So again, OCD tackles whatever you care about, and you have these intrusive thoughts because you care, not because you're a terrible person. Now, on the flip side, when it comes to psychosis, it's very different because people who have thoughts, psychotic thoughts, have them because they align with their belief system. People with postpartum psychosis cannot tell the difference between whether the thoughts they have are their own or not. They have the thoughts and they believe in them. They don't question whether these thoughts are real or rational. It aligns with their belief system. So therefore, it's very, very different. And postpartum psychosis is a medical emergency, and it's really important, if you know of mothers who are experiencing this, to get them immediate help. So that was my 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 short version of what intrusive thoughts are. Now I can't remember the other part of the questions.
Yeah. Thank you for that distinction between intrusive thoughts and postpartum psychosis, because that is a huge misconception that is out there and often what people are worried about when they start to experience intrusive thoughts. That, and your message that you are having intrusive thoughts because you care. That was a very clear message. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'm going to try to break up that question that I asked earlier. Are there common triggers?
Well, let me break that down a little bit more on what common obsessions and common compulsions are during this period, because that will help you understand what are the common triggers. So during the perinatal postpartum period, some of the more common obsessions obviously have to do with harm. Now, harm can come in many different forms, many different versions. It could be harm that is intentional, such as what if I purposely drop baby? What if I put a pillow over baby? What if I drown baby during the bath? So intentional harm. It could also be accidental harm. So what if I didn't buckle baby in the seatbelt, in the car seat properly, and baby falls out? What if baby dies of SID? That's a very common accidental harm. And then, of course, there are natural harm. So, SIDS can also be a natural harm to baby. What if baby dies prematurely? This happens a lot during the perinatal period. So or fears of harm OCD is a very common one. And alongside of harm has to do with contamination. And contamination is very common for mothers in the perinatal period, where you are so concerned about everything that you're consuming, your environment, whether there are toxins around you, whether the products that you're using are toxic, whether you're using organic food or not. There are mothers who get so drenched in this fear that they will go down that rabbit hole of researching every little product and every single ingredient in all of their products. And of course, when you're going through the internet, you're going to get so many different responses, and not all of them align with each other. So again, it's going to create doubt, and OCD is a doubting disease. So then the third type of common obsessions during the perinatal postpartum period has to do with fears of making the wrong decisions, fear of being overly responsible. And of course, during this period, you are you are the responsible person for a helpless newborn. So it could be related to, well, if I cannot breastfeed, what kind of formulas is best for my baby? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I get a car seat that is dangerous? What if the crib isn't the safest crib? What if I'm not listening to people's advice? So if you can hear all of the what if questions, those are the questions related to my sense of responsibility for my newborn. So these are very common obsessions. Now, on the flip side, the compulsions has to do with sanitizing, right? Washing, sanitizing, whether it's washing your own hands to make sure that you're not bringing germs to baby, or sanitizing baby gear, baby bottles, anything having to do with baby to make sure that no harm gets to baby. It could be related to checking and praying. So checking constantly, whether it is mental checking or it could be physical checking. You're checking for safety and potential harm to baby. You could be praying for the safety and wellness of your baby and yourself. And then another common compulsion during this time is reassurances. So reassurances through yourself, through other people, loved ones, or especially very common through the internet. And a lot of mothers during this period will say that they get stuck in the rabbit hole of the internet, and they're spiraling with all of the questions that they have, all of the uncertainties that they're trying to close the gap on. So of course, that's a lot of mothers get stuck in that. And another common compulsion during this period has to do with even avoidance of baby. So avoidance of baby for fear that if I'm left alone with baby, I might molest baby. I might look at baby a little bit too long during diaper changes, or I might touch baby in an inappropriate way during diaper changes or during baths, and I would be a pedophile. Or avoiding baby because I can't take the responsibility of being with baby. How can someone, I mean, literally, when you have a baby, they just send you home with it, right? And it's like you have no training, you have never had a baby, and like you wonder, do they really trust me to go home with my newborn that I have no idea how to take care of? So yes, it's a sense of, well, I can't be left alone with baby because what if I do something wrong? What if I do something that will cause catastrophic harm? So those are some of the common obsessions and compulsions related to the perinatal postpartum period. And if you can hear it, well, then the common triggers will surround anything having to do with potential harm. So around sleeping, around feeding, around bathing, triggers can also be certain uh, certain like words that you might associate with harm to baby. It could be anything having to do with the outdoors. So a lot of parents who have fears of contamination related to getting germs on baby might not bring baby out because of fear of baby getting COVID. What if baby gets COVID? So those are some common triggers, and anything having to do with feeding can also be a trigger as well.
Thank you. So we're talking specifically about this pregnancy and postpartum period, and there is a question coming in about, would you be able to say a bit about how hormones are affecting these symptoms during the perinatal period?
Yeah, there is a whole body of new research now that looks into hormones. And this research has been kind of around for the last decade. However, we're really looking into it, not only because of the postpartum perinatal period, but also because of the menopausal period, which I'm currently going through. So maybe that'll be my next book. Um, but yes, hormones do play a part in the severity and experience of anxiety and OCD. However, we do know that hormones it's not the only contributor to the experience of postpartum OCD. And we know that because fathers also experience postpartum OCD. And fathers don't really have much hormonal changes, not that I'm aware of from the research I've been browsing through during this period. So that doesn't really explain the whole picture. So while we do know that hormones do play a part, it doesn't explain everything. So then a lot of people question, well, then why is it that this happens during the postpartum perinatal period? Well, we do know that the only certainties in life is death and taxes, according to Benjamin Franklin, right? And then during the perinatal period, there's just so much uncertainties that exist. How is baby growing? Is baby developing fully? Does baby have any type of um, uh, growth diseases? I can't remember the specific term for it. However, there are just a lot of uncertainties during this period. And because of all of these uncertainties, it will naturally raise your what if questions. And because OCD tackles whatever you care about, and during this period, parents just have an over sense of responsibility. It makes the perfect storm for the onset of OCD, or for most people, they will say that they've had OCD tendencies in the past, even before the perinatal period, and then during the perinatal postpartum period, it just like goes out of control. So that explains better why we experience this during this period.
There was a question earlier in that initial question about what contributes to the spiraling of intrusive thoughts. In relation to that, there are a lot of questions that were received in advance, but also the ones that are coming in now that mention that they are currently struggling with intrusive thoughts. And there are lots of in different ways, and we can get to some of the specific questions that audience is asking if we have time. The main theme is, how do we stop intrusive thoughts? So let's start from that broad umbrella of how do we stop?
So I would highly suggest everyone to go to Amazon right now and purchase my book. That's number one. But you know what? You have to realize that the spiraling of intrusive thoughts is what I call the ruminato. Our attempt at ruminating, at worrying, is our misguided attempt at finding solutions to our questions that has to do with uncertainty. And as I've said previously, the only certainties in life, according to Benjamin Franklin, is death and taxes. So unfortunately, unless we're talking about death or taxes, whatever it is that you are questioning, there really isn't a black and white specific answer to. So because there's not a black and white specific answer to, your mind will continue to ruminate and spiral as what the ruminato does in order to find a solution, in order to find an answer. So it's a misguided attempt. So then the question is, what do you do with this? Well, in order to stop the spiral of ruminato, what you have to do is embrace uncertainty, first of all. Embracing uncertainty means that you accept not knowing what might happen, or accept, even worse, that the worst could happen. And the truth is, we all go through this. We all accept and embrace uncertainty every single moment of our lives. So, and if you don't believe me, I want to ask each and every one of you right now, many of you know exactly where your loved ones are right this moment. How do you know that they are safe and well right this moment? Unless you are speaking with them on the phone or you're FaceTiming them, you really don't know where they are or how they're doing or whether they're safe or not. If you have children, you might have dropped them off at school. How do you really know this very moment they are safe? You don't know. And yet we're still able to keep it moving every single moment to stay functional, even without knowing exactly in this moment that our loved ones are safe. So embracing uncertainty is the number one importance, priority. And once you can accept that reality of uncertainty, then we can move on to more specific strategies, such as exposures. So exposure and response prevention therapy is the evidence-based gold standard treatment for OCD and anxiety disorders. And what does exposure mean? Well, exposure means that you are actually confronting the fears, the triggers to your obsessions. And you're confronting the fears in a safe space, in a contained space, in order for a couple of things to happen. Number one, you get the corrective feedback that what you actually fear might not be as terrible as what you imagined it to be. Because when you avoid, you don't get that feedback. And then number two, by engaging with the fears, what you're also learning is that even if it is terrible, you have what it takes to manage through this obstacle, this challenge. And thereby, you're building your own resilience. You're building your own tolerance to this discomfort. And because you're becoming more and more resilient, you gain confidence in yourself to keep meeting life's challenges. And even though this is a very challenging period, the postpartum perinatal period for a lot of mothers, life is full of challenges. And you meet your challenges because that's how you grow, evolve, and become stronger. So exposure therapy is part of that process in stopping the uncertainty or the ruminato in its track. One specific way that I ask a lot of the mothers who I work with to do this is to sit down for 15 minutes, once or twice a day, depending on how severe your ruminato is. And for 15 minutes, I want you to practice something that I call the 15-minute worry time, which literally means that for 15 minutes, you're sitting down and with paper and pencil or pen, not typing, guys. And we don't do typing because when we write, we are using a higher level of cognitive functioning where we don't get through typing. So by writing, you're processing your worries, and I want you to write down your worry statements. A worry statement is very different than a rumination. So a worry statement has a beginning, has an end, and it is very concise and direct. So for example, I'm worried about my pregnancy. I'm worried that I will have another miscarriage, period. I'm worried that if I'm not careful enough, then things will go wrong, period. I'm worried that if I'm over exercising, then it would create a greater chance of a miscarriage, period. If you hear that, again, every single statement is concise and direct. Now, a rumination is what I call a runaway train. There is no stopping it, and it's just cycling and cycling. And a rumination or ruminato sounds more like I'm worried about this pregnancy because I've had two miscarriages previously, and I'm afraid I'm going to have another miscarriage because what if I have another miscarriage and I'm getting older and I don't have time? I won't have the family life that I want. I won't have the children that I've been dreaming of. And my partner will be devastated again. And I wouldn't know what to do with myself. And I don't know what I'm eating that is healthy or not. What if the organic foods really aren't organic? And what if there are toxins in my environment? I have no idea what's around these walls. Maybe there's asbestos in my roof. And all of this could cause potential harm or defects to my fetus. So if you hear that, that's ruminato at work. And it's important that we externalize ruminato through the 15-minute worry time, because when we do, then we're taking what we're keeping mentally, which there's no controlling what's mental, right? So we're taking that and we're externalizing it onto paper that later on we can work through, we can process through, that we can do more cognitive behavioral awareness training with. So the 15-minute worry time is crucial. And I know that there are a lot of some of my colleagues, and even some people might say, but aren't you creating more worries when you are doing this 15-minute worry time? Or I've heard people question, especially other people who are not, or other psychologists who are not cognitive behaviorists, who would say, well, you causing trauma to the mother, and wouldn't this just increase her cortisol level at a fragile time where we don't want so much cortisol in her body? Well, folks, let me just be real here. And the truth is, during exposures, we are not telling you to do anything other than what you're already doing. You're already having these intrusive thoughts. We're not asking you to make up intrusive thoughts. All we're saying is avoidance therapy doesn't work, right? So avoiding is only going to increase the power of your intrusive thoughts. And instead of increasing the power of the intrusive thoughts, what I would like you to do is take over that power and build agency for yourself to contain the intrusive thoughts at your time of choosing. And when we don't contain the intrusive thoughts, what it's like having an IV drip of worries and fears that goes into your vein throughout the entire day. And that's why your cortisol levels are heightened because of that. And by sitting down, facing whatever it is that you're fearing that you want to avoid, by writing out your worries, you're containing them. You're making them available to your awareness so that you can actually process and work through them. So that is some strategies, but more details are in my book. And I have a lot of examples from mothers across the globe who I've worked with, where I put their stories in the book as well.
Thank you for that detailed overview of ERP as well as CBT, including worry time. Going along that theme of therapy, someone was asking what the best form of therapy is, and there was another person commenting that there are multiple evidence-based treatments for OCD, not just ERP, including ACT, ICBT, so inference-based CBT, and metacognitive therapy. I was curious if you had some comments about that.
Yeah, so all of that might have value in certain places during treatment. So where ACT really is about living according to your values. And it's really important because for a mother, the most important thing during this time is the health and wellness of yourself and baby. And what I oftentimes have to tell mothers and parents in general is that your biggest responsibility as a parent is not just to love and care for your child. Sorry. I hope most of you realize that kind of comes naturally as a parent. However, your biggest responsibility as a parent is to prepare and protect your children. And if you're living according to that value of protecting and preparing your children for real life, not life just with you, but life out in the outside world where no one else will care as much about your child than you will, then it makes sense that your job is also to ensure that you are resilient and tolerant of the uncertainties of real life to do this hard work. So ACT is helpful, and some of the cognitive therapies are helpful to get a parent to engage in treatment and to stay on top of treatment and to think of treatment in a different way, to reframe the treatment, not just as I'm getting rid of OCD. However, I want to get rid of OCD because I want to bond with my child, with my children authentically without OCD's interference. So yes, while those therapies could be helpful, the still gold standard treatment is ERP. Because if you think about it, nothing in life is more important than you overcoming challenges. And there's no way to overcome challenges through avoidance. Again, this is an avoidance therapy. And in fact, when we avoid, we lose confidence in ourselves, We lose that sense of agency in ourselves, and we basically hand over the keys of our life to our anxiety monster. By confronting challenges, and it doesn't even matter what kind of challenges, right? If we're thinking about OCD, yes, the challenge of OCD are the intrusive thoughts. However, there are many challenges in life, whether it's your career, your marriage, your family, finances, whatever it is, there are many challenges in life. And when we are in avoidance mode, we're not really engaging in a way that will be helpful in finding solutions. So exposure therapy is no different than that. You're meeting the challenge in its place. You're building your own tolerance and resilience in facing the challenge, whatever that challenge is. And you're embracing that there's uncertainty in the world because there actually is. And that is how you build tolerance, and that's how you build resilience. And even though it's painful, and it's it's really, really painful. I mean, I had to do my own exposures when I had my twin boys, and my exposures surrounded imagining the worst possibilities with my twin boys. And yes, I was in tears and it was hard. However, I chose to engage in exposures because I wanted to be stronger for my boys. And I wanted to make sure that the bond that we had was authentic, because OCD does interfere with the bonding and attachment with your newborn. And this is a critical period for bonding and attachment during this postpartum phase. So I faced my own challenges because I didn't want OCD in my life. I didn't want OCD to determine what I was going to think or how I was going to feel about my boys. I wanted to be in control of it. So, another example that I've used, it's kind of like, if anyone who has been on a workout regimen, if you've never worked out your entire life, the first day that you go on that treadmill or the first day that you do resistance training, are you going to hurt? Oh, yes, you are. Are you going to want to do this work? Oh, no, you won't. The next day after you do it, are you going to be in pain? Oh, yes, you are. Why is that? Well, because you've worked out your muscles, you've broken down the muscle fibers, and then when the muscle fibers rebuild itself, you're stronger. And exposure therapy is very, very similar. It's no different, except instead of flexing your biceps, you're flexing your mental muscles. You're stretching your mental muscles in order to have it rebuild, to create the new neural pathways for your thinking to travel. So exposure therapy is no different than any challenge that you meet in life, that you face, you overcome, and you evolve and grow from.
You brought up a little bit about your own experience, which is also what allows you to bring in such a unique perspective into this topic. To the degree that you would like to share, there were some questions about how did it start for you and what was the hardest part of your intrusive thought? So anything about your own experience that you think would be helpful for people to hear.
So I started, well, first of all, I didn't realize I had OCD till I was in my 20s, even though I had intrusive thoughts from the age of 4. And in the beginning, my very first question that I remember asking was, what is death? What is dying like? And I remember asking my sister, what does it mean to die, and what is it like? And my sister just responded, well, it's kind of like you just stop breathing. So of course, being who I am, I experimented with that. I tried to stop breathing, and it was the worst experience I had during that time. And I remember telling myself, I don't want to ever die. I don't want to ever have to experience that. And I would never want that experience to occur to my loved ones, to my family. So of course, that started the spiral of my OCD. What were the things that could kill us, right, as a family? So a lot of my initial OCD surrounded fears of harm, contamination, because I also learned at that time that diseases could also cause death. So those were my big ones. And I do have many family members who also have OCD. So the genetics, the genetic loading for OCD is pretty high in my family, except we all had different subtypes of OCD. So none of us really realized that we all had the same thing. And it wasn't until I was in college where one of my professors uh, saw that I was engaging in repeating. And I think at that time it was perfectionism, where certain things had to feel a certain way or it had to feel just right. And this is back in the 90s where we didn't have laptops, it was paper and pencil. So one of my professors saw that I was writing and erasing and writing and erasing, and she called me up to class one day and asked me whether I had OCD. And that was the very first time I had even heard of the term of OCD. And then following that, it was a relief actually to realize that there's actually a term for this. Um, and then I trained with Dr. Charlie Mansueto in the Washington, D.C. area. And that's where I learned about OCD. And that's where I got all of my knowledge. My dissertation was about coming up with a family systems for OCD. I've worked with Chloe Madonas to develop this system and Barbara Van Noppen. And this is a period where there wasn't any information about working with family members. I know we've gotten so much more advanced since then. And so I didn't think that I would be suffering from OCD again during my postpartum period. And people will ask me, well, did you never have another intrusive thought? Well, of course I did. The truth is, everyone, we all have intrusive thoughts. Okay, so let's just make that clear. We all have intrusive thoughts. Just because my intrusive thoughts seem more profound to me than your intrusive thoughts doesn't mean that my intrusive thoughts are any different. And what makes a person, so if we all have intrusive thoughts, why don't we all have OCD? Well, the difference is that a person without OCD would have intrusive thoughts and go, okay, well, silly me, keep it moving, or not even be aware because they're not holding the value, they're not appraising it with the negative qualities, the negative characteristics to their intrusive thoughts. So I'm sure we've all had images of like smacking our partners, right? Or stabbing our bosses. So those are intrusive thoughts of harm, except if you don't care about it, then you're not giving it any more value than it's just a simple fleeting thought. And as soon as you give value to it, you appraise it with, oh my goodness, why did I have such a thought? What kind of person am I to have such a thought? Then you've just given that thought power. And then what is our natural instinct with intrusive thoughts? Avoidance, right? We try to avoid. And again, when we avoid, we create a bigger monster. The more we resist, the more it persists. So if I ask everyone right now to don't think of your yellow duck, don't think of your yellow duck. What is it that you're doing? You're thinking of that yellow duck. Why does that happen? Well, because you're actually putting more attention and energy onto that yellow duck than just letting it fly away. However, what if I say, I want you to do nothing except think of the yellow duck? Yellow duck, yellow duck, yellow duck, yellow duck, yellow duck, yellow duck, yellow duck. Well, over time, that yellow duck is not as important because there is just so many more other thoughts that are more valuable than the yellow duck. So you've basically overdone the yellow duck. And to give you a different example, real life example, how many of you have been told that you need to be on a specific diet? Well, when you're on a specific diet, then you're told what are the foods that you're not supposed to eat, right? So if you're thinking, well, I can't have chocolate covered strawberries, well, now I just have an image of chocolate covered strawberries in my head. And now I think I want some chocolate covered strawberries, right? So this is also why diets don't work. It's because we're thinking about the foods that we're not supposed to eat versus the foods that we are supposed to eat more of. So I lost my train of thought of what I was supposed to be answering initially. I think it was my own
You
experience,
started
right?
with your own experience and made a very strong case for the
Okay.
benefit of therapy. Yeah. Uh, Along those lines, are there any techniques, habits, breathing techniques, mindfulness are coming up quite a bit, or apps that you think would be helpful to engage daily, perhaps in addition to therapy or even before considering therapy? And when do you know medication is needed?
So in terms of mindfulness, I think mindfulness is super important to uh, living a healthy life in general. And if we think about mindfulness, it's really an Eastern philosophy. And I still today have not been able to find the one word that describes mindfulness. And a lot of people think, well, mindfulness just means relaxation. Mindfulness just means meditation. And no, that was not the intention of this philosophy. Mindfulness means engaging with your life in this moment. It does not mean avoidance of life. It means engaging with your life in this moment and to just be. Be with this moment without additional judgment, without additional appraisal, without additional criticism of your being. And if we're able to just be in this moment, then we can embrace uncertainty because that's what this moment is. It's uncertainty. And when we are bombarded by intrusive thoughts, we aren't living in this very moment. Our brains are either worried about something in the future or ruminating about something in the past. We're not in this moment. This moment has no space for your worry monster, has no space for anxious emotions that drive your intrusive thoughts. So even when you are anxious, when you have intrusive thoughts, lean in, lean into this moment. And the mantra that I give a lot of the mothers that I work with, it's lean, shift, flex. So what does that mean? Well, leaning means exactly that, what we're talking about. Leaning into the moment rather than avoiding. Lean into this moment and really get to know your discomfort, get to know your anxiety, get to know whatever it is that you're experiencing in this moment, because that allows you to learn from it. It allows you the opportunity to process it. So lean. And then shift means shifting away from your negative thoughts, shifting away from your worries rather than going down in that spiral of your worries. Shift away from it. When you're shifting away from it, what you're doing is you're expanding the possibilities, right? You're expanding the possibilities of other interpretations of your experiences rather than getting stuck in whatever rigid perspective your OCD monster wants to keep you in. So then after you're able to shift, and then let's flex your mental muscles. Now consider other interpretations that can explain why you're feeling what you're feeling, how it is that you're experiencing this. And by flexing your mental muscles with clearer lenses, that gives you the opportunity to reappraise your experiences from a more reality-based approach rather than your worry monsters approach. So lean, shift, flex.
And a quick mention about your thoughts about when medication might be needed.
Oh, yes, yes. So, you know, I have not, so when it comes to medication, it really is important to consult with a psychiatrist who is familiar with OCD. And if you are in the perinatal postpartum period, someone who is knowledgeable within this area. However, if you are debilitated and you are not functioning, then you're also creating cortisol levels in your body that might be augmented through medication. So I highly suggest those of you who have tried therapy and who have tried it and it just hasn't worked for you to consult with a psychiatrist.
Wonderful. I think we're coming just up to an hour, so I'm just going to ask you a final question. Is there anything that was not asked during this hour that you wish were asked? Anything that you would like to emphasize to the audience in addition to everything that you have shared so far?
I think we have asked so many questions, and I think they've all been super important. I just want to make sure for those of you out there who are currently in your perinatal postpartum period that there is effective help. And I know that people always told me things will just get better, except, the truth is things will get better when you do the hard work. Things don't just magically get better. And I know in parenting, in the parenting world, a lot of parents will say, well, yeah, it'll just get better. Well, the truth is it just gets different. The challenges just gets different. And you still have to do the hard work to find the solutions, to find the strategies that will work for you. And you're doing this hard work because, again, you care. You have intrusive thoughts because you care, not because you're a terrible mama, not because you're a pedophile, not because you're a psychopath, because you care. So if there's anything that I can make sure that the audience takes away with is, yes, motherhood is challenging, and there's just so much more that we can talk about in terms of how to set healthy emotional and mental boundaries, not just with other people, however, with ourselves, to limit the negative thinking that we have, and finding the value in our new identity as a mother. So there's just so much more that we can talk about, except we don't have hours upon hours. But yes, I think just realizing that you're here because you care.
Yeah, thank you for that very clear message. And there was a question that was received that said, does postpartum OCD eventually stop with treatment? And your answer there was that it does, but it doesn't just magically stop, right? With the right strategies and help, it really can stop. So before I hand it over to Jolie, I want to thank Dr. Ip for sharing your experience, your insights and expertise with us. And I would like to hand it over back to Jolie.
And I just wanted to say one more thing that, I will be starting my Stressless Mama Masterclass and my Stressless Mama community to provide more deeper support for those mothers. And it's based off of my book. So for those of you who are interested, just find me on dryip.com. And that masterclass will be coming up in 2025. And I will be resuming my podcast, my Stressless Life podcast that had been on hiatus since my twin boys were born. But I'm going to be resuming that. And the first season is going to be all about motherhood.